information, so we probably won't be able to answer all of the questions today. So, Chief, you're all set?
Sure.
Okay.
I apologize for reading, but there's a great deal of information I'd like to cover. So I will read the statement and then open it up for questions. So, first, this is clearly a case where many of us are struggling. We're struggling to understand. Paul Heenan, the man who was shot, his family is struggling. The neighborhood Paul lived in is struggling. Our police department is struggling. And yes, finally, the entire community is struggling with this particular case. I'm calling this press conference to do three things. One is to clarify the timeline. Two is to clarify some questions that are sitting out there in the community that there may be some confusion on. And then three, to talk about next steps. Our goal in any investigation is to get to the truth and to provide accurate information. What was reasonable and what was reasonable on the part of an officer under similar circumstances. Let me first say, I have not reached any conclusions. Fact-finding is still ongoing, but I want to be open and honest about what we're learning. It is important to note that the DA staff did come out to the scene of the incident early Friday, and the Dane County Sheriff's Office has been shadowing this investigation. So let me start with chronological order. Last Friday morning, around 2:45 a.m., officers were dispatched to a home in the 500 block of South Balwin Street. The call was for a possible burglary in progress, and that the caller could hear someone in the house. Officers were told that the caller was a woman, that she was with 4 children, and that her husband had gone downstairs to investigate. The first officer on the scene, Officer Steve Hymesons, got out of his squad car and walked toward the home from which the woman had placed the call. It was a very dark street, but as he walked up, he could see 2 men grappling and struggling. Based on the description of the husband provided by dispatch, he believed he was seeing the homeowner struggling with a possible burglar. It was at this point that Officer Hymesons pulled out his service weapon. He radioed to dispatch about what he was seeing and ordered the 2 men down. He ordered them to get down. At this time, Paul Heenan disengaged with the homeowner and focused his attention on Officer Hymesons. The husband moved away with his hands in the air as Mr. Heenan moved towards Officer Hymesons. Officer Hymesons began to back up, but Mr. Heenan swore at the officer and quickly closed the distance of approximately 15 to 20 feet. Officer Hymesons said Mr. Heenan grabbed him latching onto his left hand with one hand while using the other to reach Officer Hymesons' gun. Officer Hymesons believed his life was in danger and fired 3 rounds. A second officer, Officer Stacy Twombly, had gotten out of her squad at the opposite end of the block and began running towards Officer Hymesons and Mr. Heenan. As she could see, they were both in a physical confrontation. As soon as she heard the shots, she went to Mr. Heenan and began providing life-saving aid. All of this happened very fast, just as a matter of seconds between Officer Hymesons, when Officer Hymesons told all of this happened very fast, just as a matter of seconds between Officer Hymesons told the Mr. Heenan to get down when the shots were fired. Although this case was called a burglary although this case was called in as a burglary in progress, it turns out that Mr. Heenan was not a burglar, but someone who had recently moved into the neighborhood and had entered the wrong address. He did have a knife in his pocket, but he did not display it during the struggle with the homeowner or with the officer. Now I'd like to emphasize a couple of points in case they were not clear in terms of what we've been hearing questions about, emphasize and clarify. First of all, we did respond to a complaint of a burglary in progress, but that was not what the incident turned out to be. Number two, our investigation revealed that Mr. Heenan was not armed. He did have a pocket knife, but that was not a factor in this investigation. From all accounts, there was a struggle between Mr. Heenan and Mr. O'Malley, and there was also a struggle that took place between Officer Heimsness and Mr. Heenan. And number four, Officer Heimsness' service weapon was taken out at the time that he arrived on the scene and observed the struggle between the homeowner, Mr. O'Malley, and the burglary suspect at that time, Mr. Heenan. Talk a bit about next steps. This investigation is not complete. We're still in the process of completing this investigation. The investigation, as in any process like this, will be forwarded to the district attorney sometime midweek. We expect that the DA will be able to decide on this shortly, as they have been plugged into this investigation in terms of providing them information as time moves on. We will also initiate an internal investigation that will focus on determining if department policy, procedure, and training was followed. Lastly, there are a number of community meetings that are being discussed and planned. The Madison Police Department would be happy to take part in those meetings. That concludes my prepared statements, and I'll be ready